October 14th, 2024. If everyone would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to give notice that we did have an executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal issues. Next would be public participation. I know we have a very busy agenda tonight, so I would ask, though you don't have to listen to me, that people who want to publicly participate at this point do so for items that are not on the agenda that we'll get to later. So, anybody want to go? So state your name and at least your street. And you have 5 minutes. I'll give you a 1 minute warning if you.
What's that?
You have 5 minutes.
Okay.
I'll give you a one.
My name is Nancy Monahan, and I live at Chestnut Lane. And I am speaking on something on the agenda. I apologize. I do have to leave early, and I did want to get my comments shared. So my name is Nancy Monahan. I've been a resident of Radnor Township for over 20 years and a member of Wayne Presbyterian Church for over 15 years. I would like to share some comments regarding Business Agenda Item C, Introduction of Ordinance 2024-08, authorizing the Board of Commissions of Radnor Township to select and appropriate by eminent domain certain real estate in Radnor Township for municipal parking, stormwater management, and other purposes. Before I begin, I know I don't have all the information. I first learned of this yesterday from an email from Jim Galasso, the Wayne Presbyterian Clerk of Session. Today, I've spoken with Doug Bruns, Chair of the Admin Committee at Wayne Pres, as well as my Commissioner, Mr. Jack Larkin, and I thank you all for sharing insights and information with me. Given all this, my understanding of this topic is as follows. Wayne Pres has owned the land for over 154 years. Wayne Pres entered into a lease agreement with Radnor Township in 1955 for the parcel in question. The lease has not been altered since. Wayne Pres has been a valued and committed member of the community and has worked closely with the township and local businesses throughout its history. As any organization or business is obligated to do, Wayne Pres initiated discussions with the township over 18 months ago to discuss and renegotiate the lease from November 1955. Following preliminary negotiations on proposals submitted by Wayne Pres, the township counteroffered to purchase the property in July. Wayne Pres did not wish to sell. In August, Wayne Pres sent a letter to the township with a new proposal and conditional termination of lease unless meetings could be scheduled to further negotiate toward a mutually agreed upon lease. I have not seen this letter, but I believe the intent was to encourage further meetings, not to initiate termination process. Last week, Wayne Pres learned that the township was introducing this eminent domain recommendation at tonight's meeting. I believe there has been a misunderstanding, and I hope that it can be resolved without initiating eminent domain. There is a perceived hostility with this approach when Wayne Pres is ultimately interested in furthering discussions to negotiate a new lease. As a former publicly elected official of Radnor Township, as a school board member, my understanding of eminent domain is that a government entity must demonstrate that the property is being acquired for the greater good of the community. Based on the ordinance, the use of this land will remain the same as it has been over the terms of the 69-year-old lease. I do not see any greater good in this acquisition. I am a taxpayer, a resident of Radnor Township, and I don't wish to have my taxes go toward investment that provides the same deliverable. As a Wayne Pres member, I do not wish for our services to local and Philadelphia charities to go toward funding legal fees to challenge this. I'm requesting that you table this discussion and reconsider further meaningful and mutually beneficial discussions and negotiations among township staff, commissioner representation, and designated Wayne Prez stakeholders to avoid this eminent domain approach at acquiring property. Thank you for all your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bill Casey. I live at 456 Inverary Road. I'm part of the Inverary community, and I sit on the HOA council. I'm here with a number of neighbors tonight, and we'd like to discuss with the board finding a solution that we talked about on September 13th, the noise issue at the Willows. It's been about 2.5 years since the tent was put up at the Willows, and from May to October, all wedding venues have moved outside, and the noise that comes from these weddings is just unbearable for the community. We've worked with WPP, we've worked with the caterer, Peachtree, to try to find mitigating efforts, but to date, none of the efforts have reduced the noise level or the nuisance level, frankly, at all. We have a few topics we want to bring up. I'll pass the mic over to Susan, but before I do that, I want to stress that we love having the Willows as our neighbor. We want to see it succeed, but the situation that we're in right now is just untenable. There is a simple solution. We've presented it to WPP. We've presented it to the caterer, Peachtree, and that is to move the music venue of an event to the inside of the mansion. It's where it always took place prior to the tent being installed, and it's a solution that's easily achievable. We've gotten no traction from WPP. We've gotten no traction from the caterer. So we're here tonight to, solicit the board to help us find a solution that's agreeable to all the parties that are involved here. Something can be done, and I'll pass it over to Susan, give you a little more context.
Thank you, Bill. Susan Fahey. I live at 606 Lindsay Circle in Inverary. And just a few bullet points. Some are some misunderstandings that we heard during the 9/9 Board of Commissioners meeting. One was that a comment was made that things are getting better, and we believe this is categorically not true. While the WPP board has made several changes in the past year-ish, one of them, for example, is they purchased a speaker system. The reality is not all events have used that speaker system. I think the majority have, but it doesn't seem to be working. The noise is only getting worse. Their neighbors went up to visit the 9/13 event because the noise was so loud. So rather than call the police, we went up and knocked on the door, spoke to Peachtree, found out this was not one of the large events which is mandated or covered by the lease agreement, 25 large events. This was a small event. They weren't using the tent. They weren't using the speaker system. Nobody was monitoring the music. It was coming from a guest's cell phone playlist on some sort of speaker system. It was so loud that we asked Peachtree to please turn it down, and the woman said, "I don't know how to do that." So we went home, and a neighbor called the police, and there was a noise complaint filed. The incident number is public record. I'll share that as need be. The WPP, bullet number 2, the WPP board has agreed to Inverary to have somebody present at all events to help monitor and control the noise. They're not there yet. We've been asked to be patient. We have been patient for 2 years. We are now verbal, more verbal than we've been in the past. They do have people there, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but it hasn't consistently happened. This weekend, the noise on Friday night was exceedingly loud, and so the police were called again. And a complaint was filed. Whether a citation was issued or not, the police explained to us that that is up to officer discretion, and he wanted to speak to his sergeant because it was a complicated issue. Who gets the citation? Does WPP get it? Does the father of the bride get it? Does Peachtree get it? I can't speak to that, not my sandbox. But he was very professional. They were wonderful, and they said to us very notably, because before they came to our house, they drove down Darby Paley Road, they drove in the entrance to the Willows, they listened. They came up to our neighborhood and said, this is amazing. They can't believe how loud it is. And yes, we agree. This is obnoxious, my words, obnoxiously loud. So the good news is that Saturday was another event, and the event started out noisy. We were at a different house with a different set of neighbors who happened to be here, and the neighbor said, is that the band? We said, yeah, that's the band. And they said, wow. And then the band broke for dinner break, and then the band got less. We do think that they had a monitor on site, and the band was turned down, and the band was acceptable. As said last time, we're not looking for silence, we're looking for compromise. We're looking for meaningful activity to decrease the noise. We know we're not going to get silence, but when we can sing along with the band and hear the father of the bride, we said it last time, give his toast, that's unacceptable. The 2019 bullet point 3, the 2019 lease signed by the Radnor Board of Commissioners states that, quote, the WPP acknowledges and agrees that it will access and use the leased premises in such a manner as to not interfere nor cause disturbance to Radnor residents using the park and or residing at or near the park. We continue, that's an end quote, we continue to be disturbed by the noise, and as Bill has said, it's been 2 years, screaming guests, DJs, bands, etc. It does seem like that this is in violation of the lease. What role do the Board of Commissioners have? The BOC in 2019 signed the lease. It's a real good question. What is your role in managing this? We understand bullet point number 4, the 2025 events are fully booked and WPP is contracting for 2026. We've asked this before, it hasn't happened. We ask that all contracting be ceased until something can be happened. In closing, a few questions. We don't want answers. We don't have time for answers. We're not on the agenda. Does the township want to be in the wedding business with all that this entails? I don't know. That's only a question the township can answer. Number 2, does the BOC have a role to play in managing this situation? We're not quite sure who manages WPP. I don't know if it's Parks and Rec Committee. I don't know if it's Township Administration. We have offered time and time again to meet with the interested constituents, the responsible constituents, and talk. We're smart people. Everybody in this township can sit down and discuss it and try and figure out a solution. What are the next steps? I ask you folks that. We really look forward to some actionable next steps. We thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else like to join the initial public participation? Seeing no one, I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. Is there any item any commissioner or person of the public would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, could I have a motion to pass the consent agenda? And a second.
Second.
All right. And I'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, let's move on to the business agenda. The first item is item A, Resolution 2024-119, Land Development Plan, Final Approval for 411 West Wayne Avenue, first floor commercial, second and third floor residential. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Thanks. Welcome back.
Welcome. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dennis O'Neill. I'm with Herbert McCumbie's office. As we were here at the caucus meeting, everything's relatively same from there. What I did want to do, though, we prepared this exhibit. There was a question about whether or not we would be able to try to save any of the trees that we were showing to be removed. And what I'm showing here is the proposed development on top of the existing trees. And we went out and looked at them, and as you can see, the proposed development is in a lot of the trees. There is a small group of trees over on the western side that we did look at. This large tree is a large Norway maple, and its root structure is very close to the ground and very long, or very wide out from the canopy. And it would be in the driveway, and we're afraid that once we start disturbing that root structure, we would probably end up losing that tree as part of it. So it appears the best option is to clear it out before it creates a dangerous situation. But as you can see, all the other trees are really in the limit of disturbance for the plan. But I wanted to address that because that was a question that was asked by the board when we were here last time.
All right, any commissioner questions or comments? Seeing none, any public comment? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioner Abel.
Where's the trash bin at Vic and Dean's? Like, is it on the back side?
To be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what side it's on.
Okay. Do you have any barrier between your property and Vic and Dean's?
Yeah, we'll have a fence along where the sidewalk gets close to the property line, and then the rest of it will be planted.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Any public questions or comments? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote to approve Resolution 2024-119. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Good luck with your project. Item B is ordinance 2024-07. Up for adoption is amending Chapter 263, Trees of the Radnor Code, revising Section 263-4, the tree replacement formula, revising Section 263-5 by removing subsection D as to ash trees, and revising Section 263-8, review of permit applications. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
There you go. All right, Mr. Foster, is this you?
Yes, Madam President. On September 9th, this had appeared before the board as an introduction. So now we're back as to the next phase, and I'm going to be very brief. We have Seth Reeser here from Shade Tree Commission, and we also have John Rice, who can fill in any questions, but they'll be able to take it from here.
Thank you very much. Either of you have any comments or additions? No? Okay. Any commissioner questions, comments? We went over this pretty thoroughly last time. Any public participation here? The ordinance is available at the front desk if anybody wants to read the details. Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of ordinance 2024-07? Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. All right. Sorry, I turned my page too early. Ordinance 2024-08, authorizing the Board of Commissioners of Radnor Township to select and appropriate by eminent domain certain real estate in Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, for municipal parking, stormwater management, and other municipal purposes. Also authorizing the institution of eminent domain proceedings for the acquisition of land, the furnishing of security for the payment of damages in accordance with law, and the ability of certain officers of Radnor Township to act for it in all procedures and actions required by the eminent domain clause. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second? Great. Mr. Rice, you want to start us off?
Thank you. Yes, what is in front of the board tonight is a proposed ordinance to be introduced, which would, and a map of the area that we're talking about, that's the property of the Wayne Presbyterian Church. Approximately 27,950 square feet. So a little bit of background before I address the ordinance. The township and we've heard some of it tonight from one of the residents, the township and the church have been parties to a parking lease agreement since November 22nd, 1955. And that original lease agreement, and it hasn't been revised since then, although there's been some back and forth in terms of the parking needs, I think, of the church and other activities that have gone on in that area. But at the time that this was signed, the township constructed the lot, the parking lot, did the construction, put the stone base down, did the paving, installed the parking meters at the time, and there was some reimbursement from the church for that initial outlay back in 1955. The agreement that the township and church, the lease that's in effect, basically is a revenue share of parking receipts. So 50% of any parking receipts that the township receives goes to the church. I understand that the revenues have gone down over the years in terms of what is being shared. The township has, since it entered into the lease, has been responsible for insurance, maintenance, repair. There is a need to do some repaving of the lot at some point. But the lease provides for a 90-day termination notice. So the township received, and let me back up a little bit. There's been 15 months, more or less, of negotiation between township officials and church officials over a new lease. That hasn't come to fruition. There's differences in terms of the value of that, how it would be paid over time, and there hasn't been an ability to agree upon the terms of a new lease. It's been discussed with this board over the last 6 or 7 months. And so we're at the point where I think the church felt they needed to give notice, which they did. About, I think it was in August, the notice came from a representative of the church, which met the 90-day notice requirements, which would mean that the lease would terminate November 22nd, 2024. So that's where we are at in terms of the lease. It will terminate. Typically, what has happened over the last, how many years? 70 years, is the lease has automatically renewed from year to year. There's been no movement by either party to terminate it, to modify it, so it's just automatically renewed until this year. So that's the background in terms of the activities there. It's always been used for a municipal parking lot. We know that there's some stormwater issues which the church has asked the township to address. There's also some safety issues which the church has asked the township to address. And we know that there's going to be some paving that will have to occur there at some point. The ordinance that's in front of the board would authorize the township staff and the township to proceed to the eminent domain process. This is an introduction tonight. The board approves the introduction. The ordinance will be advertised, and it will come back in 2 weeks for a public hearing in accordance with the township's home rule charter. And then subsequent to that, the township would have the ability to take the next step, which would be to file a declaration of taking in Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. So the ordinance, and I'll summarize it, it's relatively straightforward. The provisions would authorize the township to acquire approximately 27,950 square feet, which is outlined on Exhibit A of the property of the Wayne Presbyterian Church. The nature of the title would be in fee simple. However, the township would preserve the church's rights to continue to use the parking lot as they've already used it for parking. That's evolved over the years to some extent, depending on activities, but the original lease outlines some specific number of events and free parking passes that the church is entitled to. The township has no intention of taking that away. It would continue on as it always has, as long as the church is there. The paragraph 3 of the ordinance authorizes the township solicitor and the other officers of the township to prepare a survey plan of the property and then attempt to acquire by amicable agreement, the property. And if that cannot happen, then the township would be authorized to file a declaration of taking. The cost of that in paragraph 4 would be paid out of the general fund of the township. So the township's home rule charter authorizes the township to acquire land by eminent domain. That is what the ordinance proposes to do, absent some agreement otherwise. Okay, any questions from the board for me?
Mr. Rice, could you just briefly go over the time frame at which a negotiation could happen, or things could change in this process?
You mean the time frame for
When,
introduction to
yeah, just
adoption?
like how much time do folks have before this is if you want to call it a done deal?
Okay, well, tonight is the introduction, and this is under the township's home rule charter. All ordinances have to be introduced, and assuming that occurs, then ordinances have to then be advertised for a public hearing. The schedule now, and at least I think the plan now, is to introduce this ordinance, and then there'd be a hearing on October 28th, advertised public hearing for possible enactment. Once an ordinance is enacted, it's not effective for 30 days. So there would be another month before any court action would occur or any filing of a declaration of taking. That would be the final step. And the church, of course, always has the right to object to that if that would occur in the Court of Common Pleas. So there's about a month and a half or so from tonight until a final step would occur in terms of the filing of a declaration of taking, which would result in the township owning the property at that point.
Thank you very much. I just didn't want people to feel like 2 weeks was the end of everything. So, any commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Agnew?
Mr. Rice, can you fill in some of the things about the negotiations and what happened? The church approached the township and then offers were made, or how we got here today at this point?
Well, I think the initial step, there was a letter sent in July of 2023 by a representative of the church to the commissioners and the staff that started the process of a new lease. The township was presented then with a lease which increased the rent and provided for some other requirements in there. And I want to go through all the details of that. I don't think that that's absolutely necessary, but that was in a proposed lease. And there were some meetings after that with township staff, and the board was briefed on all this. Ultimately, there was a letter in the last couple months that proposed a 2-year lease with a right of first refusal, and we could continue to negotiate, but the church wanted the township to pay the increased rent, which would go to about $80,000 a year from what it is now. And I looked at, Bill had prepared sort of a document that he had sent to me, and the lease payments have gone from over the last 10 years, from a high of about $35,000 to a low of about $15,000 over the last 10 years. So, and it looks like COVID probably impacted some of that revenue that came to the church. a high of 36,000 to a low of about 15,000 in 2022. But it's a 50-50 split. So whatever the parking receipts are that the township receives, they then remit half of that back to the church.
And who gets the other half?
Pardon me?
Who gets the other half?
Township. Township gets half, the church gets the other half.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the township has a separate revenue sharing agreement with the AT&T lot with the WBA.
Okay. When was the termination notice of the lease given?
Would have been August. Yeah.
Wayne Press terminated the lease.
Yes, yeah, we received another proposal from church representatives and to me, try to continue to negotiate and also notice under the lease of the 90-day termination was given at that time. Towards the end of August, Kathy.
So why the need to take this step?
You
Well, I'm
asking
sure that's
me
a
or your
question
fellow
for the
commissioners?
solicitor.
Oh, anybody can answer it.
I mean, straightforwardly, because we've received notice of termination. If we don't do anything, then the lease terminates. In the middle of the holiday shopping season, there's nowhere for people to park, or at least we're going to lose 70 plus or minus parking spaces. I heard what Ms. Monahan had to say, and I take it seriously that the notice of termination was offered just to spark further conversation, but it's a legal document. You can't pull the trigger on something like that and then just hope that we'll meander forward. And moreover, as you heard from John, we've got a timeline that we've got to follow. We can't turn this on a dime where we say, let's have an additional couple of weeks of conversations, and if we don't get to a resolution, then we'll start it when we get to mid-November. It'll still take us 2 months, and we won't have a declaration of taking filed until early January after holiday shopping is over. Now, when we get started today, that still gives us an additional 2 months plus to have this conversation with the church in advance of the deadline that they have posited. And I'll note, by the way, that even when we approve this tonight, we're still not going to meet that November 22nd deadline. They're going to be able to put up a fence and keep people out for a week or two or whatever it is. This is just as fast as we can possibly move. So I mean, you ask why we have to do this, that's why. It's entirely a timing issue, and there's an additional 2 months to continue having negotiations, but the church decided that they wanted to put a clock on it. We are 100% being guided by them in this.
Yeah, but, your answer is we need to do this because we need the parking spots for local businesses. But should we really be basing our parking formula on spots that we lease and don't own? Because at any point over the last 70 years, they could have taken the lease away. So why are we basing our parking requirements on spots that we lease and not own?
Well, first off, I'm not sure that I concede that that's a fair point, because as I think we're going to demonstrate, you can't just take the lease away without the township making a decision one way or the other. That's what it means to be an eminent domain authority. The second, though, is that for the last 70 years, and this is the real practical answer, for the last 70 years, the township has had a lease on this property without disturbance. Saying that that all could have disappeared at any moment is just counterfactual. This is what we all understood. This is what the businesses base their business plans on. This is how we've parked the business downtown for literally decades.
And we've had developers come through here and be approved for plans where they haven't met the requirements for parking on site, and we've allowed them to use other spots within the township, and everyone has said there's not a parking issue in Radnor Township.
Correct. When you take away 70 parking spots, you create a parking problem. It's easy to say there's not a parking problem. You create one real quickly when you start taking away all the parking spots, though.
All right, well, so in my mind, negotiations happened. We put our offer forward. The church rejected it, and so the government has now come in and said, we don't like your offer. You're going to take what we want to give you, and you're going to like it.
That is wildly false.
it's
That
not-
is wildly and offensively false.
It's
What
not.
happened was not the township came in and said, we're going to take it. What happened is we were told, we're taking our ball and going home, the lease is terminated. And as a result, as was
Which
completely
they have a right to do.
predictable, as do we, as was completely predictable when that happened, the township then filed for
It's
condemnation.
bad government, and I'll be opposed to this resolution.
That surprises me not at all, because you are able to be opposed to it, and you still get the benefit of all the parking spots for the businesses that your constituents will enjoy going to and operating out of. You get to have it both ways, and that's just not fair or right. That is an example of bad government.
I would oppose it if I was in the minority, or I would oppose it if I was in the majority.
I actually really like Jake. He and I are friends, but I'm going to beat him up on this.
Well, I mean, you can beat me up all you want. I think I've been consistent for 7 years. If I take a stand, I'm going to do it regardless of, what position, if I'm in the majority or minority. I think it's bad government that we had negotiations. We didn't like the way it turned out, so we're going to take this step.
Again, that's just not what happened.
It is.
I'd like to say that I'm disappointed that I'm aware a letter that went out. It was shared with us by Frone. I'm disappointed that it did not include in the letter the fact that the church terminated the lease. I got a lot of phone calls today from members of the church who had received a copy of the letter, and I was the person who ended up telling them that fact. I think there's a conversation to be had here. I think that there's a solution to be had here. And if it weren't for the fact that we're now operating under this very short deadline that we've been given, I think that we would not be here today. And concealing that, or I shouldn't say concealing, but not divulging that to the membership and then having them call me is personally frustrating, and I think it is inconsistent with the fair process. So that's what I would add.
Thank you. Any further commissioner questions or comments? Commissioner Agnew?
I do want to say, at least in my understanding of the negotiation process and things that had happened, or didn't happen, that, again, it's been 70 years, and there was never any talk of, that I know of stopping the lease, of discontinuing it. And that's sort of in a, to use a phrase, it's a nuclear option. And the church has shown the willingness to do that. And that changes everything. That the church would discontinue our use of 79 spaces, or what I say is the residents' use of 79 spaces, and can do it at any time now, really does change everything. And that's my viewpoint on it. If I'm wrong, please don't hesitate to tell me I'm wrong, but that's how I see it at the moment.
So, but you're saying that, they can have the parking, they have their property, but they can only lease it to the township. Like, that's the only use that they can, that it's good for.
I'm saying that is the use that's been going on for 7 decades, and what everyone has come to rely on. If there's another way to go about it, to do it, that's to be addressed. But the fact is, that is what's happened, and that's what's been happening. I understand what you're saying is that it's private property and they should be able to do what they want with it. It's also our job to provide certain aspects of things. There are takings that happen and that maybe should happen with regard to making the place, the township, safer. We have rights to do that. Maybe we should do it. I don't know if we've ever done it before. But the execution of the termination and really is the cold water in the face of, we could lose that forever and not being able to do anything about it, and if we don't do something about it. So we're stuck, and we've been put in this position.
Okay, any further commissioner comment or questions? No? Public participation.
Thank you. My name is Doug Bruns. I live on 63 Oakford Road. I've been a homeowner of Radnor Township for over 25 years and a lifelong member of Wayne Presbyterian Church. I am currently an active session member and also chair of the administration committee that is taking over this matter
May
for
I
the
just ask
church.
you, I don't know what that means, an active session member. Just tell me what that
Part of
means.
the ruling elder, part of the session, the board of the church. So, and as chair of the administration committee, I'd like to comment on the status of the parking lot and urge the commissioners to table this motion tonight. There has been lots of confusion about our August letter. First of all, we would never stop the parking. We understand that that's a critical piece for our church and also the community of Wayne. So that's a false statement. Everybody thought we would be putting up fences or anything like that. I just want to start with that because I heard that multiple times here. That's a false statement. That was never any of our intention. It's been 18 months. Our goal has always been to update the almost 70-year-old lease with the township to a new mutually agreeable lease. And that was what was presented, that we want to continue negotiations. We understand that parking is critical to the future of Wayne Presbyterian Church and also the community, the local businesses, and the church, and the many people attend programs in our building and around the community in that area. As an organization, we're obligated to initiate discussions 18 months ago to update this lease. It's an old lease. I don't know how many 70-year-old leases are in the township. And it's been 18 months that we've been trying to negotiate with the township. Since engaging with the township, we have not been able to move the negotiations along. There's never been a counter proposal from the township. We've proposed things. We don't get anything. As much as this letter that we sent in August, we had nothing until this past weekend when there was actually a phone call that we were notified that this event was happening. So there's been no counter proposal from the township on any kind of new lease terms. We are as we said in the letter, we're willing to extend the existing 1955 lease, but we respectfully request good faith, active conversations to update and work on a new lease for the future of downtown Wayne. So, we did send the letter on August 14th, but like I said, we've received no response, and we were very surprised and disappointed with the actions of the commissioners with the eminent domain. Wayne Presbyterian Church has been a valued and committed member to the community for over 150 years, when we have worked closely with the township and local businesses throughout its history, and we offer us and the township offer free parking on Sundays as well as Saturdays throughout the holidays at significant expense, but we're happy to join the township in this holiday tradition. We love patronizing Wayne with businesses and encourage our own congregation to do the same. We will always continue our mission to serve the greater community. Our revenue from parking meters, as true, is down over the past few years with the change of use of downtown Wayne from a retail district to more of an entertainment district. We are not enriching the church from the parking revenues, but every dollar does help us stay open and active for those we serve. We hope to continue to serve the Wayne community for years to come. We do support many of the other local community services like the Wayne Senior Center, the Wayne Food Pantry, and the Highland Avenue Civic Center that we have spent, and members of our congregation have spent significant time helping and working with to improve over the years. We believe that the appropriation of church property for parking and stormwater mitigation is extreme unnecessary action. As a Radnor resident and member of Wayne Presbyterian Church, I would not want to see Township or WPC waste our valuable time and money or needless legal fees when I'm confident that we can jointly work together to come up with a new long-term agreement. Wayne Presbyterian Church respectfully requests the opportunity to sit down directly with commissioners and review the parking lot and overall plan for a new lease and potential forms of that lease. I urge the commissions to table this motion tonight and would be glad to schedule additional conversations on a new lease for the future of both Wayne Presbyterian Church and the residents of Radnor Township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Reed Taylor, and I'm here tonight to represent, along with others, the Board of Directors of the Wayne Business Association. We have voted to overwhelmingly support the township retain the use of the 70 spots that we're talking about in the North Wayne lot. We urge the parties to preserve what the business district has relied on for 70 years. To have nearly 50% of the North Wayne lot disappear would pose a devastating hardship to the businesses of Wayne.
Thank you very much. Any further public participation? Come on up.
Thanks a lot. I'm Linda Walters. I've been a resident of Radnor Township since 1993, I guess, and I've been a member of Wayne Presbyterian Church for almost as long. And I'm a real estate lawyer by training, although retired. My question for you is, can anybody give me an example of another transaction where the parties had a contract and where the one party has the right of eminent domain? Because to me, that is a very heavy-handed leverage, and that's not typical. I bet you there's no other examples of that. Let's say you gave an easement to the township to park a truck on your lot, and then all of a sudden they decided, they just wanted to take your property by eminent domain because you refused to give them that. This is not a typical transaction here, okay? And you need to realize that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandy Karate, and I'm a resident of South Wayne for 39 years, and I'm a member of Wayne Presbyterian Church for 35 years. I'd like to point out that the revenues have dropped precipitously, but also since 1955, Radnor, Wayne Center has changed dramatically. When I moved there was only one restaurant, and all the businesses were daytime businesses. And so what has happened in the last, I'd say 10 years, is that the businesses have become restaurants, and their big parking need is in the evening. Well, the church has been subsidizing because our lease from 1955 is from 8 to 6 p.m. Yet, if you go to the lot, 8 to 6 p.m., it's almost empty. And so the revenues are down to $15,000, $20,000 a year. And for 80 parking spaces, that's not a lot of money. The businesses in the nighttime businesses, because the daytime businesses like the Tiger Shop and the dry cleaning business, their patrons still pay to park. But the nighttime businesses get a free pass and can park free on the church's lot, while members, one of the programs that we support is the Wayne Oratorio Society. They have practices at night. They have concerts at night. Those individuals can't find parking because downtown Wayne is using it. We have never had a problem with it, and we have said in our negotiations with staff, there have not been any meetings with any commissioners. I remember Jim Higgins used to come and see us every once in a while and say, this is what's going on in the township, but we haven't had any meetings with commissioners. And we are like saying, okay, we're okay with letting the businesses park there. We're not taking that away. But the tax revenue that you're collecting, the township should pitch in for any revenues. If you go to Lower Marion in Ardmore and Bryn Mawr, their time meter parking is to 8. Westchester is till 10, which is very similar to downtown Wayne. I think it would just be in fairness. Is it fair for Tiger Dave to his patrons to be paying and not Blue Elephant? So I think it's in fairness, and I have a lot of points here, but I'll let other people speak. So thank you.
Thank you. You were getting close to your time up anyway.
Hi, Hi, I'm Elizabeth Andrews. I lived in Radnor till about 14 years ago. My father's Graham Andrews, who was on the Board of Commissioners, 4th Ward Commissioner for years, president of the Board of Commissioners, and I'm a lifelong member of Wayne Presbyterian Church, and I happen to teach nursery school at Wayne Presbyterian Church. I know my father was on the board when the ordinance started where you could actually serve alcohol and eat outside. Part of that was my influence, thank you. But it makes me very sad that this is happening. This is not the Radnor and the things that I remember. I don't understand. We've been getting along together. My dad was also a member of the Wayne Business Association. He was a broker and worked at Merrill Lynch when it was in Wayne. I just think there needs to be a solution to this without it being hostile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the board, I'm Frone Crawford, and have been in discussions with John Rice and Bill White over this for the last year and a half or so. And I guess you can tell I'm probably the oldest one in the room. And I was in 7th grade at Radnor High School back before anyone invented middle schools. Ted Dean was a senior. And I have some roots in this township, even though I no longer live in the township. And I want to emphasize that in our letter of August that's been talked about, we had been negotiating for over a year at that time, and we had not had a counter proposal other than the township wants to buy it from John Rice's letter. We had had a session, a Zoom session, in which I said to John and to Bill White that we're probably going to have to send a conditional termination letter because it takes 90 days, and we've been at this for over a year, and we can't just let another year go by. We need to try to work a solution. However, it will be conditional, and it is conditional, and we have no intention of putting up a fence. Simply, we can only terminate that lease under its terms once a year. And what our expectation was, and what we put in the letter was, we would want to continue negotiating to try to get this resolved. And if we had made some progress, some substantial progress, we would extend by mutual agreement the lease while the discussions were going on. And that's still our position. We want to work with you, but at some point along there, a couple times I had suggested that it would be really helpful to have a committee of the commissioners to actually be part of the discussions as opposed to the answer that we got, and it was all in good faith. I'm not saying it wasn't in good faith, but the answer was always, okay, we'll take it back to the commissioners. But as you know, we never had a counter proposal to our initial proposal, which was not a demand. It was what we thought was a fair value at the $80,000 per year. But we understood that you weren't getting the most out of the parking lot anyway, because you were not charging for evening parking and so forth, and we would take that into consideration. We also then, you were good enough to share your appraisal of the property, and it does say for the use as is, and the value of your own appraisal for the use of our land under a land use was substantially higher than the $80,000 that we were initially asking. That was an initial proposal. We never got a financial counter proposal. We would like to continue working with you. We will indefinitely extend the status quo in the meantime, and as indicated, we would request that you table this and give us an opportunity to work hopefully directly with at least one, if not a committee of the commissioners, and of course with Township Solicitor John Rice and your manager and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public participation on this?
Good evening. My name is John Larkin, and I've been a member of Wayne Presbyterian Church for about 24 years.
One more time? I apologize. What's your name?
My grandson's name is Jack Larkin. I'm John Larkin, and I'm going to call your mother when this thing's over. The fundamental framework of eminent domain is that 3 requirements typically have to be met. First of all, eminent domain has to prove that it provides for some public purpose, public service. Second, the government needs to prove that there's no reasonable alternative to the forced acquisition of property. And third, that just compensation is given or awarded to the property owner. Given the discussions tonight and some of the stories we've heard about the attempts to have negotiations, it seems to me that we certainly haven't even scratched the surface regarding finding a reasonable alternative to this. I would suggest that we table the motion, engage in open discussions, and find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bill Marino. I am a resident 7 years. I'm at 2 Paul Road. I don't really have a dog in this fight. I just read the agenda, and the resolution struck me as heavy-handed. I'm a commercial guy, and it struck me as a garden variety commercial dispute. I appreciate getting that termination letter, and I appreciate you all have a mandate to protect the business interests and the public interest in parking down there. And so that's a valid point. And I can appreciate you might have felt like your back was against the wall, but this feels like a tremendous overreaction. And it feels like the timing is a bit manufactured. So for instance, Commissioner Larkin is focused on the 2 months. Well, Commissioner Larkin, if you get an extension, then that deadline isn't as concerning to you, correct?
That's incorrect, no.
Still concerned with the deadline if they extended it?
Yeah, first off, no one's offered us an extension. Second off, the letter doesn't actually contemplate any extensions, contrary to what we've heard. And third off, I don't know what the terms of an extension would be, and we can't be in a situation where we have a snap termination later on. Reminder, we can't condemn anything with less than 2 months. I don't want to negotiate something from the dais, but if the church wants to come back and have a conversation with our solicitor, he's right over there.
So that, I think, would be a constructive conversation. So my point is, if you were to table this tonight for 60 days, allow the parties to get together and see if there could be a resolution around the lease or even a purchase. I understand that there's some back and forth about purchasing that property. That might avoid setting what I think is pretty bad precedent in this township. The government coming in and taking this property over the church's objections. The other points I'd like to make are, if this is about parking, certainly couldn't the church just put up their own private spaces? I've seen it done. So if you just want to preserve parking, the church could come back and say, all right, I don't want to lease it to you anymore, but I'll preserve the parking. We put up our own private spaces, our own private meters. That would certainly address your concerns about the parking. Just a point. Last point about the hardship. There's been some studies done for property development here that show within a couple hundred feet, there are lots that aren't used. So what you're really doing is saving residents some walking distance when there's plenty of parking if you go just a little bit further out. You all did that stormwater project across the street. People don't really want to walk across the street. The spots are there. So it could be a question of, yes, it could be a little bit more inconvenience. Yes, it'd be a little bit further distance, but people get used to that. I would just ask you guys to think very carefully about setting what I agree with Commissioner Abel is pretty bad government precedent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm David Leidy. I'm a lifelong resident of Radnor Township. I practiced dentistry in the township for 43 years, following my father, who also practiced here since 1950. I'm a member of Wayne Press, and I find this to be very concerned. It concerns me very much. As Ms. Andrews said, this is not the Radnor Township that I remember. Now, if we as an entity have erred in the way we have presented our position and our wish to continue negotiations and to establish a beneficial lease arrangement to both parties, then we are in error. If you have interpreted our position incorrectly, then you would be in error. And I do not see why, as adults and people who have the ability to discern differences, that we can't come to some ability to have recourse and go back to negotiations. You can tell me, Mr. Larkin, if we've presented you with that letter, and if it would require us to withdraw that letter, would that change the situation? Pardon
It's
me?
not a back and forth question and answer period. I think we don't have a letter that says you're withdrawing that.
I understand that. I understand that. Okay, well, I would think that we can come to some sort of an agreement to negotiate this out. The church has no intention of doing anything other than leaving that area as parking spaces. We've turned down developers that came to us asking us if we had an interest in developing the property. So, and I don't think it helps the situation to make the church like they've been hostile in these negotiations, and I think that has been disseminated, that we've been strong-handed here. We've used what we thought was an appropriate venue. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I do just want to clarify one thing, that Frone did send a letter to, an email to Mr. Rice earlier today saying we are willing to extend the lease. So it is on record that we are willing to extend the lease. And as I said, as chair of the administration committee, I'm here that we can authorize that, and we can formalize it tomorrow.
Thank you. I'd like to make a couple of observations. I think, one, I completely get the sentiment that people want an amicable agreement here. I totally understand it, and I hear it. I also am not sure, and I might ask Mr. Rice about the conditional termination of the lease, and what does that mean legally?
I mean, the termination letter was a termination letter. I mean, I guess the condition, the way I read it, is that the lease would be terminated unless we come to some agreement. And it was clear what the church was looking for. You know, basically three things: more revenue, stormwater management, and some safety considerations. So, and the board had, you know, already, you know, in conversations, wasn't willing to do that. So I don't know what other conditions there were other than agree to what we proposed, or, and I think the letter said regretfully, we have to issue the termination notice. So it brings the matter to a head, you know, and I think that, you know, with an introduction of an ordinance under the township's, you know, charter, you know, you have to, once it's introduced, you have to advertise it then for enactment if you want to proceed on, no less than 10 or more than 30 days. So you have either October 28th or November 12th to bring this back on your agenda for enactment, which gives, I think, everybody a lot of time to have further discussions on a lease. But, you know, there's an issue that Commissioner Larkin put out there, and I think the church needs to understand that, is there will always be a lease termination provision in any new lease. And that is something that you're always going to have to deal with going forward, whether it's now or 10 years from now. So, you know, maybe there's some other creative solution to a traditional lease. You know, but we are where we are now with, you know, with the property and the proposed ordinance. So even with an introduction, there's plenty of time to continue trying to come to some kind of resolution, which I don't think is a bad idea at this point.
Thank you. That was more than I asked for. I want to point out a couple of things. As was mentioned, it did strike fear into the hearts of most of the residents of Wayne, I think, when several years ago there was a plan to develop that lot. Presumably at any point, the church could terminate the lease and decide to do that and build a big condominium building over that lot, whatever. The other thing I wanted to quickly address was the decrease in revenue. Lots of people are putting forth why that might have happened. We do know that it was highest right before the pandemic. A couple of things happened. There was a pandemic, so people were not parking as they might have before. And presumably that's come back. But the other major factor that no one's mentioned is that the SEPTA lot was free. And people park where it's free. You know, it's just the nature of the beast. The other thing that people haven't really addressed is people talk about the transfer over to restaurants from other types of businesses. Well, I spend a lot of time in Wayne, and those restaurants are full at lunchtime. So I don't think we're just talking about an issue at 6 o'clock in the evening. And then the last thing I really wanted to share was the proposition that came to us was to have the lease be $80,000 a year. Well, $80,000 is more than the total revenue that has ever come from that lot. So to me, as a person in government, that's giving taxpayer money to a church, and that's just not acceptable. So I just wanted to say that before we really get the negotiations going. I think, again, as Mr. Rice has said, we're here, we're listening. We obviously cannot have a meeting with all of us. That's not a public meeting. It's just not allowed. But, you know, in bits and pieces, phone calls, meetings, we could get our heads together, put it that way. Other commissioner comments?
Yeah, I guess I'll just circle back. There are one or two issues that I wanted to bring up in response to some of the comments that have been made. There was a comment that I heard, there is no anticipation that the church will ever do anything there except for parking. I'm reading from the August 14th notice of termination that we got, which constituted a rejection of the township's offer to purchase the property. And the reason we were given why the township shouldn't be allowed to purchase the property was because the church wanted to reserve the right to do stuff there that wasn't parking. The church said that it might conclude that it had no future use for the property and decides to solicit a buyer willing to pay a fair market price. Second, the church might not intend to sell the property, but receives an unsolicited offer that was attractive to it. Or third, the church decides it wishes to convert all or part of the property to an ancillary use in expanding the physical plant. So we were told in no uncertain terms, there is a universe in which we are not going to use this space for parking. And as Commissioner Myers brought up, just a couple of years ago, the church was anticipating using the area to build a condominium. So it's not like we are actually guaranteed that there would be parking in perpetuity. There's been a point that's been raised a couple of times that revenues have dropped significantly, and that's absolutely true. That's just math. I agree with you on that. I do, however, want to bring up the point the church is about to get 7 figures dropped on it by the township, which is not my goal. I did not start this year thinking that I wanted to pay $1.6 or more million in order to preserve what's already there. It's a colossal waste of township dollars, but we have to preserve the parking, and given the concerns that we have, that's the mechanism by which we do it. So I just want to stress, one of the things that has really not been mentioned is the outlay of funds. And I should also stress, that's the township's estimation of fair market value. I heard that there was concerns that that was not a fair price. The church can contest that. The church may win. A board of view may split the baby. And as a result, the church will receive substantial dollars from the township. So I don't want that to be overlooked in the conversation, particularly when the genesis of this is the church wants more money from the township. I also want to point out, I've heard a couple of times, there hasn't been a counter proposal. No one's negotiating with us. You're not moving fast enough. We meet once every 2 weeks during the fall, winter, and spring, and once a month during the summer. We have a lot of issues on our agenda. We want to negotiate everything rapidly, but we don't get phone calls in the middle of the week where we can all just get together at the drop of a dime. It takes us a long time to negotiate something as important as this. I wish it didn't. I'm sorry we can't move that quickly. We just, like any municipality, we move slowly on stuff like this. With that being said, I do want to continue to say we've got 2 weeks before we come back. We've got 2 months before any decision is final. I've heard that a lot of people keep saying there's a deal to be made here. Awesome. I don't want to condemn anybody's property. I would love to get through my tenure here without doing any condemnations. Go to that guy with a proposal, make it reasonable, make it one that ensures that we're not going to lose parking for the businesses and the residents that rely on it, and we're done. That's very straightforward.
Any further commissioner comments? Okay. Call a vote. It's time to call a vote. A vote would be affirmative for ordinance 2024-08. All in favor? Aye. 4 to 1 in favor. Again, as Commissioner Larkin just said, there's plenty of time and there's plenty of will. So let's think of a good compromise. Item D, ordinance 2024-09. It's an introduction for the general obligation bonds not to exceed 10 million, bank qualified, for capital improvements, including real estate, facilities, infrastructure improvement projects. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All right. Who wants to lead us in on this one? Mr. White.
Bob Tate, I think, will lead us in. Do we
You
want to just take
wait,
a
have a
minute or
5-minute
two?
break?
Yeah.
Sure. 5 minutes. Or why don't we say 6 minutes, because that'll be 8 o'clock.
How you doing? I can't believe they didn't cave in. Impressed.
All right, we're going to get started again. We are talking about ordinance 2024-09. Mr. Tate. I believe that's you.
Thank you, Madam President. Before you tonight is the introduction of ordinance 2024-09 for bond issuance not to exceed $10 million. As typical, or I should say historically, the township has issued general obligation bonds in the past for significant capital improvements, whether infrastructure, parks and trails, or stormwater. Our last issue was in 2022 for $10 million issued for significant stormwater capital improvements. This particular bond issue, these general obligation bonds will provide financing for a number of capital improvement projects presented initially as part of the 2024 budget. Primarily, these are facility improvements, including the roof, HVAC, as well as solar panels in this building, as well as in the Public Works building. And with your approval tonight, we'll move forward, and ideally, if adopted at the next meeting, the bonds would then be sold the day or two after that October 28th meeting. Any questions? And we do have with us tonight from Stifel Financial, Mr. Ed Murray, our part of the underwriting firm, Mr. Dan Kozloff with PFM, Public Financial Management, who serves as our pricing agent on these transactions, and Suzanne Mays, our bond counsel from Cozen O'Connor. So any technical, high-level questions, I know they would be happy to address. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. All right, Commissioner, comments, questions? Anybody? Everybody's happy? Okay, sorry we don't have any good questions for you. All right, any public participation on this issue? Seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of ordinance 2024-09? Raise your hand. Unanimous.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. The next item, we're out of our agenda, our official agenda, is the budget overview by Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam President. Ian, if you could switch over. Hopefully this is working. That's a good sign. All right, so I appreciate the board carving out a couple minutes tonight to allow me to step through the 2025 already Township Manager recommended budget. The intention of tonight's slideshow is to provide the 50,000-foot view of Radnor's finances as we stand today, how we've done over the last couple years, and then what 2025 might look like. I'm going to step through the fund structure as well as our budget goals as we establish annually. They're mostly the same, but we like to make sure that we're reiterating them on a regular basis. Also discuss staffing levels for the administration, and then we'll get into some of the numbers with the general fund budget, real estate taxes, some considerations for future discussion, and then touch on stormwater and the sewer fund. As we typically do with tonight's presentation, it's just a kind of a launching point of the numbers. We're not really asking the board for any kind of decisions or directions on these items. We're just laying the foundation for discussions that'll happen over the next month, month and a half towards adoption. So our fund structure, this is always the most exciting part. Just how the township's finances are organized through fund accounting. Everyone always gets really excited when we talk about this stuff, so enjoy. We have four broad categories. Our general fund is by far the township's most important fund. It houses all of our operating departments. I have those listed up there between police, public works, parks and rec, ComDev, engineering, HR, IT, finance, administration. It's also responsible for making sure that every other governmental fund has the necessary resources it needs to make the payments that it's required to do. So The general fund makes significant transfers for both our capital, which in our case, or in the case of this presentation, the capital consists of the departmental fleet and equipment, as well as the township's annual debt service requirements. Then we have a handful of special revenue funds. As the name dictates, those funds exist each with their own unique set of revenue guidelines those dollars have to be spent on that unique purpose. Examples include our sanitary sewer fund, stormwater, capital, our shade tree fund, park and open space fund, our park impact fee, and debt service. Those are segregated accounts or segregated funds to ensure that dollars in one fund cannot be used for purposes in another. So sanitary sewer rent can only be used for sanitary sewer type projects, same with all the other funds on that list. Then we have 4 fiduciary funds, which is a fancy way of saying that the township is managing assets that are not ours. Those include our 2 pension funds, our civilian and police, as well as our OPEB fund, and then the development escrow fund. Again, those are assets that we're holding on behalf of another entity, and again, those cannot be commingled with any other governmental purpose. And then the last group's enterprise funds. Enterprise fund, which in our case is the Willows, sort of, because it's obviously transitioned from what it used to be when the township was operating the mansion into the agreement we have today. So it doesn't really have a whole lot of financial transactions like it used to. Within the budget document, we spend a lot of time taking a look at the combined operating statement. So what this does is it breaks down the revenue and expenditures for every single one of our governmental funds. As you could tell by the numbers, the general fund houses most of the activity, 40 million of the 60 total. Then we separate each of the special revenue funds out into their own set of accounts that you could see the activity, again, from a 50,000-foot view for each of those funds. It's broken out. And then we have our enterprise fund. Again, like I said, the Willows doesn't generate a lot of revenue or have a lot of expense at this point, but it's still a fund that we have to keep separate. And then ultimately, there's the bottom line, our net revenues for each of the funds as they exist now. Positive numbers are net deficits, while the net revenue is shown as a negative number or a number in parentheses. So typically, we'd like all those to be in parentheses. Obviously, we still have a little work to do on the general and sewer fund. So 2025 budget, as we typically do, we start building these numbers with the primary goal of maintaining the services that each of the departments provide, which I'll highlight a little bit on later on in the presentation. We're obviously very proud of the departments and what they do for the community to help make Radnor such an amazing place to live. They deserve a ton of credit for their part in making it such a great town. New with 2025 is there is a finish line coming up with the comprehensive plan. We hope that or it is scheduled to be adopted early in 2025, which will offer an excellent opportunity for the township to get together, review that planning document, and start establishing some priorities based on what comes out of that plan, which in turn will help us start building future budgets, both in terms of ensuring financial sustainability as well as capital and other priority type planning. Sanitary sewer, first of all, setting rates to meet the operating needs, which, as we've talked about, is meeting the RHM expense. But for 2025, we've also included a significant amount to get going on the camera project to evaluate the entire system. And then stormwater, just continuing to execute on the projects that were approved as part of the 22 plans. And we're actually at kind of a crossroads in terms of funding, with still a long list of projects to be completed. So some further discussion and direction on that. This is a chart that we always include in the budget documents in the way back, so it doesn't probably get read a lot. But it is meaningful in the fact that you could see from a head count perspective that with all of our departments, they're operating at about 137 full-time equivalents. That is complemented in various departments with some part-time and a significant amount of seasonal for recreation for the day camp. Those part-time and seasonal numbers are not in here. But for the most part, you can see the departments have been operating with basically the same level of staffing as they have for the last, close to decade now, after a fall off that occurred close to the recession there in 2008. The only changes recently were the addition of the new CSU unit in the police department that was approved in 2023, as well as converting one of the contracted code positions, hiring it in-house, and then reducing the contracted by one. And then when you go back a few years, we added resources to the Act 511 program too. But outside of that, the departments have been operating pretty much at the same levels. So a quick summary on the general fund, where it gets its money from, and then where those dollars are spent. This is the revenue pie chart, which shows, as it has consistently for forever, three broad categories of revenues: 38% coming from our real estate tax, 39% from the Act 511 enabling taxes, and all the other revenues, which includes permitting, departmental earnings, fees, fines, costs, grants, and a very small amount of miscellaneous makes up the rest of that pie chart. But in total, the general fund revenue for next year is just shy of 40.1 million, with all those making up the total. The Act 511 summary quickly is broken up into different categories of taxes. The local service tax is based on head count. Every employer in Radnor is required to withhold $52 per full-time employee and remit that to the township. We generate roughly $1 million from that revenue. It's a good indicator of the township's, how the employers of Radnor Township are doing in terms of numbers. And that has been relatively stable even through COVID, to be honest. Mercantile is more of a retail-based gross receipts tax. Obviously in COVID, it took a little dive there, which the graph indicates in the middle of there, but it has recovered nicely since. A testament to our businesses, our retail-based businesses and restaurant-based businesses that have bounced back. Business privilege is by far the biggest of this category. It is a gross receipts tax on pretty much all the other activities, business-type activities in Radnor. Continued, one thing that I want to emphasize is that with this year's budget, in consideration of the offset of how much real estate taxes might be needed to balance the budget, coupled with the very positive performance that this group has done this particular revenue has done the last 2 years, we're going into this with a little bit more of an aggressive estimate. As you can see, it's not out of line with how it's performed in prior years, but at 9.6 million, that's roughly $500,000 more going into the budget than we normally would budget for this. So hoping that the business related activity continues its strong performance. And then the last group is the realty transfer tax. That's the percentage that's put on every transfer of realty in Radnor Township. We get a share, as does the school district. On the expense side, as you can see by the bar chart, our expenses have remained relatively flat from 2002 to current. There are some outliers within those numbers: transfers to the sewer fund, one-time capital expenses, some legal costs on some ongoing litigation matters that will cause some of those numbers to bump up, mostly up. They don't ever really come in lower, but we're waiting for that day. But on the aggregate, the departments do a really good job of maintaining costs as best they can, with the understanding that about 66% of our budget is made up in our the payroll and related expenses for the staff that actually provide all the services. We take a look at the makeup of those expenses. As I noted, the two largest pieces of that pie chart are wages and compensation, along with payroll liabilities. Other significant pieces include our interfund transfers. As I noted earlier, that's the general fund's obligation to make sure that the capital and debt service fund has the money it needs to pay for those items. We also have a significant amount of contracted services. Again, that's legal, that's all of the different contracts that each of the departments have in performing their services. The last piece that's relatively big are the community organizations that Radnor funds. And for this presentation, that does include library as well as the others. So it's a little bit bigger of a number than we typically present it. That's just how it's organized within our financial system. This is a lot to look at, but in a visual sense, I think this pie chart does a really good job of demonstrating the large variety of departments and services that are offered from our organization. Everything from police, fire, and community development in terms of public safety, to our engineering and public works, to recreation and community programming, as well as the building and grounds, IT, like the internal administrative staff. The retiree benefits, to touch on that, that's the healthcare obligations that we're obligated to pay for our retired folks based on whatever collective bargaining agreement existed at the time of their retirement. So that is typically a larger number, but it's consistent year over year thanks to being part of the Delaware Valley Health System or Health Consortium. I usually show this chart for two reasons. First is it's a quick snapshot, again, of where the larger departments are and how the money is distributed in terms of spending out of our business, with obviously police and public works being the two largest. They also make up most of our full-time staffing numbers. And then the retiree benefits and the transfers. Noting the two little spikes in the transfers numbers, that was monies required or needed in the sewer fund because revenues weren't keeping up with the RHM. I'll get to it later, but we got better news there. Then we get to just the general fund operating statement. So this is the same organization as the one I showed earlier, but this just focuses on the general fund, showing some history, as well as where we're at, both in terms of our original budget for '24 and where we're at actual, as well as how things compare with what we're looking at for 2025. Again, the revenues, it's same grouping of expenditures as the one pie chart demonstrated, and all getting us down to a baseline net revenue or expense. Again, the positive numbers are the ones shown in the parentheses, whereas deficits are shown as a positive number. So 2021 and 2 were good years for the fund balance. 2021 because of, or 2022 because of significant federal contributions from the COVID subsidy. And then that backed up on us in 2023 because business taxes did not perform as well, and we had some large expenses occur. For 2025, we're looking at a net deficit of $174,000, which coincidentally is very, very similar to where we were sitting a year ago when I was making the same presentation. I think that was close to $200,000. And it's just a product of revenues coming up just short of the regular growth we have on the expense side between the collective bargaining agreement increases and the regular costs of operating the township. So a couple things we have, come back. So as things stand right now, all things being exactly as they are today, we're at about $174,000 net deficit. What this graph or what this table demonstrates is kind of below the bottom line amendments to that. I'll start in the middle here by highlighting two additional expenditures that we are either on the hook for or every sign or every discussion indicates that it's money well budgeted based on where we're at. And those two things are, we have the Wayne Master Plan, which has a total cost estimate of $200,000. Township was fortunate enough to get a $100,000 grant through the TCDI grant. So we are obligated as part of that application for the other $100,000. And then to start setting aside some money for engaging assistance with a zoning rewrite that would begin late in '25 and then take '26 to '27 to complete in all likelihood. Ultimately, that gets us down to the bottom line with a 0.087 mil adjustment, which is roughly 2%. That gets us, in addition to these expenditures here, that gets us to virtually break even, and then in compliance with our fund balance policy, which according to the numbers says that we should have about 10.2 million, and we would be about 400,000 to the good on that one. So some other things that come up as part of our budget conversations when we're talking with departments and requests are made based on calls for services, expanded services, areas of emphasis and need, and things that come up throughout the year. We only get one shot at the end of the year to have any meaningful discussion about changing revenues. So this usually when these type of items come up. There are some requests from the administration for consideration that are not part of the numbers I've presented. These would be for additional discussion and consideration at some point over the next month or in future years for consideration. Economic Development Manager, an additional resource in the Parks and Rec Department to be able to keep up with their service offerings. Police, an additional detective that we have the documentation and request, or the backup material for all this. I'm not intending on getting into it tonight, but based on the load that the detective unit is currently under with the number of cases, there's a request there. Same with the Highway Patrol Officer, which would be dedicated to the Township Parks and Community. And we've had it in the last year. Several of our meetings here we've spent time talking about enforcement on various items in our local parks. And it usually just comes down to not having a resource that is boots on the ground in the parks regular enough to be actively enforcing those ordinances. Public Works has the need for a couple of full-time folks to help bolster the various offerings they have there between the park maintenance and an emphasis on the ever-growing emphasis on trees, which is a good pun. I didn't mean it, but it's a good pun. The additional assistance in the mechanics division, mostly geared towards the smaller equipment to help them turn around those types of things and get them back into service quicker, while the other mechanics are working on the vehicles and large equipment and trying to keep those running, as well as a highway laborer to dedicate more times for the needs with stormwater inlets, cleanouts, repair, as well as managing Skunk Hollow, leaf removal, snow removal, potholes, all the things that Public Works does a great job on. The number of roads and sewers and service delivery points throughout town continues to go up. And so additional staffing there is at least something for consideration and conversation, as well as in the sewer department, adding an additional resource there to help with the before you dig markouts, which is almost a full-time job unto itself, but also improve response times for emergency calls, and then getting into the system more regularly for cleanings and evaluation, which we hope to really start going on in future years. In addition to the requests from the township departments, we also have a handful of requests from our community organizations asking for some additional funding in various areas. Both of the fire companies had requests for operating and capital dollars, as well as the library, the senior center, and the art center requests for additional dollars. Again, those requests are not built into the numbers I presented and would be something for us to talk about as we move towards adoption. A quick summary on the real estate tax millage, a little bit of history and where we're at today. So our current millage rate's 2.4365, which generates $15.6 million. That's, as I noted earlier, 38% of our revenues. Where part of the reason why the real estate tax gets all the emphasis and focus is because that is the one area that the board has the greatest control over, versus, say, the Act 511 taxes, which rates are fixed and cannot be changed. So the tax rates there can't change. That's entirely dependent on business activity in the town for revenue increases. This is the one area where the board has the opportunity annually to adjust the millage. So we end up spending a little bit more time focused on this revenue base than any others. The summary here just demonstrates in numbers what the break-even point is. It is 2%, generates about $315,000, costs about $32 to the average, $26, $27 for the full year to the median taxpayer. And then there's, we always include the chart just to show a history on where the township's tax rate has changed over the last 13, 14 years, as well as what the overlapping tax rates are. We typically get credit for the tax rates adopted and imposed by other taxing entities. We are only responsible for the Radnor Township portion of that, but I know Radnor Township's included in other names too. So we usually get credit for both ours and the school districts, but for our purposes, we're only focused on the township piece. Some departmental highlights. I know that the commissioners are very well aware of this. This is more just to make sure that our departments are getting the type of accolades and positive commentary that they deserve. When we talk about a full service organization, I think when you go through department by department, it's very evident everything that our different folks are doing. In Public Works, they're taking care of our trash, our recycling, yard waste, as well as leaf collection, field maintenance, snow plowing. And all of these lists are very incomplete, but these are some of the highlights of excellent services that they're all providing every single day. Parks and Recreation, it's always mind-blowing at the number of events, programs, all of the different things that department is able to offer the community on an ongoing basis throughout the entire year with the staff and the resources they have. It's always extremely impressive. And at the same time, building the community-based partnerships. And more over the last couple of years as we've been dialing in on our facilities, getting involved in the management of those in terms of capital projects and the needs at those various facilities as we go. Police Department, the board was nice enough or approved the addition of the Community Support Unit, which has had resounding success in its almost year now in existence. Very, very proud of that unit and what it offers the community. As someone who's able to take a look at the calls for service and the incidents almost daily, the number of calls that are dedicated to this unit are impressive, and having those resources available not only helps those folks in need at the moment, but it also frees up the other officers to spend more time in their patrols and in their dedicated areas of the township. So it's a win not just for those who need the support in that moment, but also all the other areas of town. The board also approved the license plate reader and drone technology, which has come in handy multiple times. The license plate reader almost on a daily basis. Drone technology has been helpful in finding missing persons, documenting large events, traffic issues, those types of things, which have allowed police then to make decisions in real time on trying to address those. Police spend a tremendous amount of time in the schools helping make sure that they are protected and relationships are always being built, as well as the accreditation, which is, again, it's a daily thing that the police department is managing. Staying on top of best practices, it just recently submitted a series of policy updates and new policies, and it's just part of staying on top of the accreditation process, and more importantly, making sure that the department is up to date with best practices and getting their training it needs to make sure that those practices are out in the field every single day. Engineering, these meetings are usually dedicated, at least at the end, to Mr. Norsini and all the projects that we have going on. So I think out of any of our departments, this one gets the most airtime in these meetings, and that's because of projects like, and we have them listed there, the Lancaster Avenue sidewalk, which was done, North Wayne sidewalk, the adaptive traffic, which we're still working with PennDOT on trying to get moving, South Wayne storm sewer system, the North Wayne, the field system that was updated, Cowan Park, as well as the North Wayne area tree trench, some culvert replacements, the West Wayne Preserve and Fort Stormwater Management, which was the one that's most recently completed, as well as many, many other ones, including small ones that don't always get discussed in these meetings, but they're the ones that Mr. Wagner's working on that resolve, ponding here, a storm sewer there, a piece of pipe in someone's yard that needs fixed, those types of things. As well as carving out time to meet with all the land development services, which is, again, something else that is on a daily basis. And to that end, they partner up with community development and offer some of those same land development type meetings on a regular basis as it pertains to zoning. This department, community development, also is doing all of our code and permitting services, thousands of permits that come through that office every single year. We have 2 full-time people now. It used to be 1 out there handling most of that. We supplemented it with contracted services, but our 2 folks are the absolute best, and the more times they're able to offer their service, the better for everyone involved. No disrespect to our contracted service, but our guys are the best. As well as rental housing and property maintenance, which, again, those are almost daily calls for service and issues that come in that need to be addressed. Property maintenance, highlighting that that's a part-time position. The calls come in every single day, and we've also, through Mr. Bruno, have developed a pretty good working relationship with the utility companies, which is not always easy in dealing with poles and wires and all of those things throughout town. Because, as we've talked about in these meetings, we don't have control over that. So any movement, any positive movement there is based entirely on the relationships that Bill is able to foster and then capitalize from. Finance, spent some time in these meetings talking about some of the successes of this department with the audits and the strong internal controls and making sure that the numbers we're presenting tonight are accurate and reliable, as well as making sure that the assets of the township are safeguarded, they're insured. And then this department also helps our residents out on a daily basis with all the revenue collection. Not always excited to come see finance in some of those regards, but those are the resources that we're using to provide the services, so it's absolutely necessary, and these folks do a fantastic job. And then a little bit of the behind-the-curtain services that finance is overseeing with HR, between the 137 full-time folks and the almost 200 retirees, offering all the necessary services to those folks, and then our IT, sustainability, grant coordination, right to know, and all those ancillary administrative type services that department offers. And then the administration, I mean, we all get to work with Peggy, who is the engine that keeps us all running. She's the one getting these agendas put together and all the backup material, and making sure that our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted with regard to documentation and setting up meetings, and making sure that this end of the township is operating the way it needs to. We have the support of John through the solicitor's office, as well as Labor Council and all the other special counsels that are needed on a regular basis with the lawsuits and insurance matters. And then the last couple of years, the board was nice enough to add a public information component where we have seen incredible growth in terms of our outreach to our community, whether it be electronic or social media outlets, making sure the news of the township is getting out there as often, as accurate as possible. So I appreciate you giving me just a couple minutes to talk about those departments and the leadership folks that make it all happen, that are sitting in this room tonight. They do a fantastic job every day, and they have awesome staffs that come to work every day and are happy to serve our community. So a great shout out and kudos from me to all of them. Quickly with sanitary sewer, as I discussed earlier in the meeting, the board has adjusted rates, which isn't always the most popular thing to do, but has adjusted rates in a way that has allowed us to generate the revenue to where we are, at least on an annual basis, meeting expenses. As you can see by the revenue numbers from the sewer stormwater, the title is a shared title between both funds. This is only the sanitary sewer revenue. As you can see, those numbers have increased dramatically over the years with the rate increases, which has helped us keep pace with the RHM numbers, which have been escalating at the same rate from 4.6 million up to 6.4 million budgeted for next year. As I noted earlier, we did include a large capital set aside for the to get going with the camera evaluation of the entire system. We anticipate getting that rolling out early in 2025. And as you can see at the bottom line, we've had in 21 and 22 significant deficits in that fund where the general fund needed to bail it out, and then those numbers have improved the last couple of years. That said, for 2025, we still have a positive, a little bit of a deficit number based on today's water estimates. We will zero in on that as we get closer to the end of the year. But as those numbers suggest, based on estimated water consumption as it exists today, it would require an adjustment to 1311, up from the 1262 that it is currently for the rate, which is about a 3.9% increase. The stormwater fund.
Mr. White, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Just that it caught my eye and I won't be able to think anymore. Can you go to the RHM Sewer Authority contract? Right. So you have under 2024 revised budget $6 million and
Yes.
change. Actual is 4.5, so that's year to date. Are you predicting that'll pretty much flush out to the 6 mil?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We pay these in quarterly installments, and
Got
we
it.
still owe the
Okay.
fourth quarter. So when it's all said and done, we'll be north of 6 million.
Thanks. I just couldn't, then you were at 6.4 and I
Yep.
just couldn't
Nope.
get beyond that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking. All right, stormwater quickly. The fee for stormwater has been $29 per unit since its inception back in 2014, I think is the number. So we're on 11 years of collection. That generates roughly $1 million per year, which is very reliable since its inception. It's always been $1 million plus or minus per year. What we've been able to do over the last couple of years with the board's direction and authorization with the stormwater plan that was adopted or approved by the board in 2022. We borrowed $10 million in 2022. As I noted earlier, with the list of projects, we've invested over $14 million when you add up the capital expenditures on the various projects over that time period. And as demonstrated, we built up a significant cash reserve with the borrowing and then have spent it down installing projects. Where we're at today is kind of at a crossroads where we've exhausted the cash in the fund and the borrowed money getting these projects done. So we'll need discussion and direction on the next phase of funding and projects as we move forward. And that's, we bill sanitary and stormwater in the spring of every year. So similar to real estate tax, we get one bite at the apple per year for any changes. For 2025, all things being equal, we're at about $439,000 positive. So we have some time to have some discussions and direction. This isn't a situation where it needs to be decided upon in the next month or so. So moving forward, we're presenting tonight. The charter requires the adoption of a preliminary budget, usually done at the second meeting in October. We've always just designated the township manager's version as the preliminary for purposes of satisfying that charter requirement. And then in November, we can have an agenda item or two where we start getting into some of the decision-making levels of the budget and begin to start introducing legislation and have some adoption. What is not on the calendar and what we typically offer every year is there's obviously a ton of information that is behind all of these summary numbers to offer any commissioner the opportunity to come in and meet with Bob or me or any of the department heads to step through any of this in detail to make sure that you have a good comfort level on where the numbers are at and what they mean before we start getting into the actual legislation and casting votes. So just a quick recap, the budget, 2025 budget goals, step through those, how the numbers look for 2025 for the general fund, the sanitary sewer fund, stormwater fund, and then our calendar. And that's really what I had to present tonight. So again, thanks for giving me more time than I'm sure we wanted to, but I do appreciate it, and thanks for letting me get in and spend some time giving the departments the time they deserve for a little bit of discussion.
Thank you. That was a good overview of the scenario. Any questions, comments? Yeah. Commissioner Agnew just wants, could you just do that one more time? Right.
Yeah, so here's what the presentation is.
Yeah. And I have to echo your commendations of what a terrific staff you have hired and who work so well, both together and with us. And we really appreciate all of you. Don't have any questions or comments for you. I have one suggestion, though, just for me. I know Jack won't want it, but can I get a paper copy?
Actually, thank you very much for saying that. So the next step for us internally is to build the budget book, which will include all of the details that we've included in the years past. So, yes, we'll make it available electronically for those that like it that way, and we'll print off hard copies for anyone who wants one of those. And
Well, actually, I do have a question along that lines, because I will watch this again. And maybe Ian will be the one who can answer this. When I watch this again on YouTube, will I be seeing this or no? Will I be seeing what your presentation was? Is that what's going to be on YouTube? Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing else, let's hear reports from board liaisons. Anybody? I haven't had a meeting since last time. Do you want to do anything?
Tammy, while you're here, sorry. I know you gave a big report at Parks and Rec. Do you want to just do a summary of that? It was mostly the summer camps and others.
Of programming or events?
Yes.
Or everything? Because I could
No, make
talk
it-
all night, but I don't think
Yeah,
everybody
sure.
wants to
Let's
be
go.
here. Just a quick summary of things, I guess, that happened. We had the fall harvest on October 6th, which was a tremendous success. We had probably a few thousand folks come through the Willows, so it was a really, really great event. We also have coming up, we have the second annual Halloween at Hartford Park. It's a costume contest, dress up for dogs, so it's a really great dog event coming up. If folks want to learn more about that, everything's posted at the website at radnor.com/recreation. I know the Radnor Conservancy has the free tree giveaway also coming up. This is both going on next weekend. And then we also have the Spooktacular Trail and Scavenger Hunt coming up on October 24th. Good thing I have my report here, so I have the dates in front of me. And then we have the Radnor Run coming up on October 27th. We have Trick or Treat at the Township Building coming up on October 30th. And then, of course, we're already going to be starting taking gifts for Santa's Delivery, which will be coming up on, the delivery will actually take place on December 8th, as of right now, is where we have it scheduled. So lots of great things. Again, folks can, go to the website and check it out or sign up for our e-newsletter. Also at Parks Board, we're also still talking about dogs in parks. There's a discussion going on right now about looking at all the parks again and where dogs are permitted, where they're not permitted, whether or not we'll implement more leash policies at other parks where, we're just observing the ordinance right now where it's under an under control designation. So I encourage folks to come out to the Parks Board meetings who are interested in learning more about that. We started talking about Ditmar Park with the potential of allowing dogs off leash or on leash on the walking path to be permitted, just given some of the restrictions in the neighborhood there. And it's sort of morphed into, okay, let's take a look at everything now again, once and for all, and potentially make some ongoing changes to the ordinance. Still discussing Odoricio Park planning, and then just regular updates, of course, on some of the projects that have been ongoing, like Fenimore Woods and Radnor Activity Center. So we had a big meeting last Thursday night. Folks can tune in and catch up with that. And obviously, if they have any questions, they can contact us.
Thank you.
The only thing I would say, even though I'm not the library liaison, is just to let everyone know that the twice yearly used book sale is this weekend. Yeah. Okay. Any new business? Any old business?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just one piece of old business. So we had the neighbors from Invery show up tonight and express continued concerns with events at the Willows. I don't know what the planned schedule is, but I would like to suggest including that as a discussion at the next meeting. You know, I don't think anyone wants to stop events from occurring through the end of, I think they have outdoor events through the end of November, but to their point, you know, we have to really figure out a way to resolve this issue. It can't go through 2025. One, having the neighbors show up here every meeting, telling us about the noise at the previous weekend's events. Two, calling the police. It's just not a good use of our, I mean, we're sitting here listening to the manager say we need more resources because our police are stretched thin. This is an issue that we can hopefully resolve one way or the other. So I'd like to get those conversations started, and I would like to have that discussion at the next meeting.
No, I don't think so. We just have to get, yeah. No, you just have to ask, and he did that, so thank you. Any other old business? Any final public participation? Seeing none, could I have a motion to adjourn? And a second? All right, all in favor? We're adjourned. Happy Indigenous Peoples' Day.